Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Michael Zuber, One Rental at a Time. And if you haven't figured out yet, One Rental at a Time YouTube channel is very, very different. Mainly because I stay in my lane and I reach out to experts that have so much more experience in areas that I have none. And today we have the one and only Jonathan Twomley. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Michael. How are you today?
I'm doing well. So you brought something to my attention this morning that I had not heard. But given your background as an attorney, I thought we should talk about it. So apparently the Fifth Circuit, which you can tell everybody what that is, just declared that the SEC is unconstitutional, which when you told me, I almost fell out of my chair because I cannot imagine what happens if that is upheld by the Supreme Court. So catch us up. Tell us about the Fifth Circuit. Tell us what this really means and what it's all about. And should I be as frightened as I am at the moment?
So the answer is yes, you should be.
Great.
Because the Supreme Court, the current constitution of the Supreme Court, is showing itself willing to throw settled law aside, okay, and do what it thinks is right, like regardless of the consequences. So
tell us about the Fifth Circuit first. Why is the Fifth Circuit important? Because I don't think myself included knows how it fits in the puzzle.
Yeah. So there's a lot of background to this. So the first thing is, just what is the Fifth Circuit? This is kind of easy to answer. There are 13 judicial circuits in the United States.
Okay.
There is one district court for every congressional district in the United States, and then they're grouped into basically regionally circuits. So if you have an appeal from the district court, it goes to that circuit court.
Got it.
And then there's one Supreme Court on top of that. So basically you get one chance to try your case, and then you can appeal
and then one more.
Claiming that there's an error of law. This is maybe a distinction that people don't need to know about, but you can't appeal a finding of fact from the court. So if the jury decides one way or the judge decides it's a finding of fact, you can't appeal that, but you can appeal errors of law.
Okay,
right?
got it. Yep.
Misapplication of the law, whatever.
Okay.
And then basically then sometimes you'll have what's called a circuit split, where one circuit decides one way, another circuit decides another way, and then the Supreme Court has to resolve it. So okay, that's sort of typical thing. The Fifth Circuit covers Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. And
okay.
It is historically one of the more conservative circuit courts, as you might imagine, based on where it is. Mm-hmm. But this decision is pretty radical, even for a conservative court. So
okay, so there is what. So just again, I want to be a layman here, right? So again, it was litigated, it was appealed on some kind of error in law or opinion, whatever.
I'm not sure of the posture of the case, as they call it. Okay, so I don't know what the underlying issue was, why, but I'm assuming that the SEC brought some kind of civil or criminal investigation against someone. Mm-hmm. They were found guilty in the district court.
Right.
And they appealed to the Fifth Circuit.
Got it.
And one of the arguments that they made was, well, the SEC is unconstitutional, so they can't regulate us. Right?
Interesting. And then that's how the Fifth Circuit ruled. Yes, right. The SEC is unconstitutional.
Right. And so the basis for the ruling that they're unconstitutional is something called the NonDelegation Doctrine, which was created in the 1930s as a way to attack the administrative state, which was growing under the New Deal. It didn't get invented in the New Deal. I mean, going back, you've got the Interstate Commerce Commission goes back to the 1880s. You've got like various like federal bodies, but they really started to grow in size during the Great Depression and the New Deal. So the administrative state is basically kind of like what everybody is used to. You've got all the federal departments, right? And the way that the government works is Congress really doesn't have the bandwidth to like minutely write every single rule, right?
Yeah.
So what they do is they write enabling legislation saying something like, the SEC shall have the right to regulate securities,
Got it.
right? And then it delegates rulemaking authority to the agency, right?
Got it.
Now, this non-delegation doctrine says that's unconstitutional. The legislative branch cannot delegate its legislative authority to an executive organ.
So
right?
let me play this out as a simpleton, non-lawyer, never pretended to be one, never wanted to be one. Just, only the smart people are lawyers. So if
a lot of dumb lawyers out there.
Fair enough. So it's interesting. So if I play this out, right? So first off, the SEC has an important day job, at least as I understand it, governing lots of things, Wall Street, stocks, mutual funds, all of that. If it's declared unconstitutional, is one of the outcomes the SEC, I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but is it simple to say the SEC could be disbanded, or does Congress just need to get off its ass and create laws and then it's all good? Or
what would happen is if the Supreme, so I mean, I need to sort of finish the argument.
Sorry.
Sort of the background, but just to answer the question. So well, actually, why don't we bracket that?
Sure,
make
fair
it
enough.
a little more. Okay, so
Thanks.
just make a note to ask me that question again. So the non-delegation doctrine was first invented in the 1930s by people who opposed the New Deal.
Got it.
And the Supreme Court basically said, this is bunk, and it disappeared for 50 years until the 1980s when it was brought up again by people, it's like the sort of Reagan Revolution, people attacking government, right? And so it's basically been slowly gaining credence on the right among sort of Federalist Society types. And now there is a kind of like a pretty, not a zero chance that a majority of the Supreme Court buys into this non-delegation doctrine.
Right. Okay.
So now what this means is that if this is upheld by the Supreme Court, basically 100 years of the way America does business is going to be threatened, and it will cause chaos. And so now, just in terms of the SEC, right, what is likely to happen? Well, I think initially the SEC's power to do anything will cease to be, right? Unless the Supreme Court sort of stays the ruling until like something can be worked out, right? But that's unlikely to happen. They will just say, that's right, it's unconstitutional. The SEC will have to like put its pencils down. And then what'll happen is Congress will probably start working on some legislation that they think is going to resolve the issue. However, how they do that, I have no idea, because they literally, unless they were to go and take the federal rules code and just enact that, right? Like I mean, I guess the easiest thing for them to do would simply to be, let's pull down,
copy this.
We'll take all the SEC, rules off the shelf, all like hundreds and hundreds of volumes of them,
and just sign it.
We'll just enact this, right? That would probably solve the problem. However, what will happen in reality is that every single interest out there who has an issue with one of these rules will take their paid congressperson,
special interest,
them to oppose this, right?
This little thing and this little thing.
Right. And then what will happen instead of, I mean, I know there's a lot of people in this country who hate experts, right? They just think all experts are bad and they know better. Now, I would much rather personally have like expert SEC lawyers writing the rules than having a bunch of like congressmen.
I wouldn't want Congress write term
like a bunch like, people who are like, dentists and like former professional athletes and like whatever, who think that they know everything. Going to come in and like try to write the securities code for me. Like, no,
thank you.
Effing way, right? Do we want that to happen? Not to mention the fact that most of them will be in the pocket of someone.
Oh, of course.
Right? And so who will be trying to get their own little like special thing through. So
Yeah.
you wind up with this huge mishmash of stuff. So that's one thing that could happen. The other thing that could happen is, well, then it just goes back to the states, right? Now these people who think like, hey, the federal government is not going to regulate us, woohoo, we're free now. They're going to wake up to the joy of now having, like, if you want to do an IPO, well, now you got to do 50 different IPOs.
Yeah,
exactly. In every single different state, right? And every single state is going to be different.
Oh.
Now, the way that this is going to affect, if this goes through, the way that this is going to affect, say, like a syndicator, right? Anybody raising money for a real estate deal, but also think about anybody raising money for
anything.
A new company,
yeah,
anything, right? You know, the accredited investor definition is going to be different in every single state.
Exactly.
I mean, everything is going to be different in every single state. And so now what people will have to do is like, well, if I want to go and like syndicate a deal, I'm going to have to either this
just stops. It just stops. It stops lots of things.
Yeah. But not only that, but then if this precedent is if they say the SEC is illegal,
that's
right?
Exactly where I'm going. What else? Yes.
Basically, the entire federal government is illegal as we know it, right?
Yeah. FDA, you know,
all
of them.
So you can go back. So like the reason that the SEC exists in the first place is because in the 1920s, there were people out there selling stock in companies that didn't exist, right? It was like
true snake oil.
If you want like cryptocurrency to be like, if you want the whole stock market to be like the crypto world, well, welcome to like 1920s securities non-regulation, right? And so, you know, or you'll wind up with like the New York Stock Exchange is in New York City, so New York State will regulate securities for everybody, and like the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, which is in Illinois, will have a different regime. And then like,
where's the NASDAQ? It's like virtual. It's not. Does it have a headquarters?
I'm sure it has it must be incorporated somewhere,
I
right?
guess. Yeah.
So then that state will regulate that, right? And then you know, so this kind of like, so if you want to raise money, for instance, like if I want to syndicate a deal, I'm going to then have to say like, I'm only going to offer this to people who live in New York, or I'm only going to offer this to people who live in.
Well, that would be interesting. Where would it be? Where the asset is, or where you live?
Well, you'd probably get regulated by both.
Oh,
right?
Geez,
you'd probably get regulated by, and so let's say like, well, I want to buy an asset in South Carolina.
Yeah.
Right? But the money is here in New York, right? And so, well, whose definition is going to control? For both states are probably going to say,
I'm first. Yeah.
Both states are going to say our law applies. Now, what happens when South Carolina says, oh, we don't care, you know, it's caveat emptor. There's no, we don't care about accredited investors. Anybody can invest. And New York says, you know what? We think the definition of accredited investor hasn't been revised in 30 years. So we think that should be $1 million of personal income to be accredited. Now, which is it now, right? Yeah. And so like, it's going to create complete chaos. And then you multiply that across like, you know, the reason we have an FDA, right, is because people were putting sawdust in sausages, right, in the 1920s, right? And so we thought that, well, maybe that's not such a good idea, right? Or using rotten meat, right?
Might want to have standards, exactly.
Right, and then the thing is like the libertarians, they say like, oh well, you know, if you die from eating like rotten meat in your sausage, well, your heirs can sue, and then they won't do it again. Like, well, that's maybe, but of course they've got more, those guys have got more powerful lawyers than you, right? Those guys, you know, can like gum up the works, right? And then, what incentive, and you're dead already anyway. So, you know, great for you, you know, your heirs may retire someday, good for them.
So this Fifth Circuit ruling is a big deal. The next step is obviously the Supreme Court, which is probably months away because that stuff has to be scheduled. So this is something to pay attention to, is what I hear you're saying.
I mean, they can, you know, I don't know what, I'm sure that the ruling probably is stayed on appeal. Like the Fifth Circuit doesn't, I don't think, have the power to like stop the SEC from working, but it'll definitely go up on appeal.
Yep.
I mean, and the issue then becomes like, you know, how, rabid is the majority of the Supreme Court into like having this vision of like 19th century America be the rule for a modern country, right? So if they're hell bent on this thing because they think like, oh, I think it was Oliver Wendell Holmes talked about an errant formalism, in which he meant like, yeah, people might be like, well, yeah, well, I mean, you literally look at the words of the Constitution, it doesn't say there can be an SEC. But if we were to stick to that, I mean, we would have like, we wouldn't have a modern state, right? Yeah. So but you could be formalistic and say, well, yeah, there's no SEC in the Constitution. The Constitution gives Congress the power to amend the Constitution by creating an SEC and passing a constitutional amendment, and all the states, 3/4 of the states can decide we want an SEC. I mean, it's frankly like a ridiculous idea. So but it really, I think people, I would say I think probably on basis the Supreme Court will figure out some way not to throw the entire country into like complete chaos.
I mean, if you look at this as like, we keep the SEC or we go back to the 1920s, I would hope that's not a party left or right, red or blue thing. I would hope that's bad for all of us.
Right, because I remember like when I was in business school in my finance class, my finance professor was like, he came out and one day he's like, I'm a fiscal conservative. I tend not to like legislation. However, regulation, I tend to want the government to be light-handed in regulation. However, the SEC regulations are fantastic. I mean, it's basically, this is like the best regulations there are. And the thing about the SEC regulations too is that they're not, SEC regulations are all about disclosure, right? They're not about like you must, like you can do this and you can't do this, you must say this.
Disclosure.
Like, it's about disclosure and like making the market transparent so that people can then make their own decisions. But it's basically saying like you cannot, like there has to be a company there. Like you have to show that there's a company. You have to make certain disclosures,
audited returns, and
so that the market can make informed decisions, right? Correct. So the idea that like that should be like, we should go back to a world in which, well, you don't have to, it's caveat emptor. It's your, Mr. Investor who has a job and you've got a family, like if you want to invest in something, it's your responsibility to go and find out if this company really exists or not.
Yeah.
Right.
No, thank you. Don't want that.
So if the Supreme Court, what I was about to say was, I would say that my guess is that the Supreme Court is going to find a way not to like completely like destroy the United States economy with one decision. However, I don't think it's guaranteed though, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think I think it's going to be closer than people think, and it's going to, and that should scare people. Yeah.
That it's not a layup is concerning.
Yeah, I mean, it should be a 9-0 decision, but it won't be, and that's it could be a 5-4 decision, and that should frighten everybody that we're like that close to like dismantling.
Armageddon.
Yeah, like I mean, people are worried about inflation. I mean, can you imagine what's going to happen to inflation if that happened? Like if basically.
The amount of shysters just stealing people's money is going to be horrible.
Not just that, like what is going to happen to like the dollar if the Supreme Court rules that the federal government is unconstitutional, right? What is going to happen to the dollar? The dollar will just collapse overnight.
Yeah, you want to talk about losing reserve currency? That'll do it.
Yeah, I mean the dollar will basically become close to worthless, right, on international markets if that happens, right? So I mean, hopefully the Supreme Court, and this is the kind of thing where the Supreme Court, this is not a legal decision, right? If they would like to stick, if they really believe that like the Congress overreached in creating the SEC, that's like a legal decision, right? Yep. They're going to have to make essentially like what's called a public policy decision, right? Which a lot of, people of a certain political bent hate because they want like, well, just what does the Constitution literally say, right? So so like they will have to make a quote unquote unconstitutional decision from that person's point of view.
Okay.
To save the economy, right? Because it's the intelligent, like it's the necessary thing to be done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But
this is
so
there's a lot here. I want to thank you for bringing it to us because I did not see it. We will. I'll be watching for it as we go forward. I think you're right. My hope is it comes down 5-4, 6-3, whatever it is. We can't go backwards, right? We can't go backwards.
It would just be like, I mean, of all the things that like you could have thought of as like a black swan event that could come down the pike and kind of upset the apple cart, the Supreme Court deciding that, you know, the entire modern American government is unconstitutional. Is not one of the.
That was not on the list.
It was not on the list, right? And the fact that now we even have to think about this is just frankly like insane. And that, you know, the Fifth Circuit it's a conservative court, but it is not never historically been like a wild, crazy bunch of people, right?
Yeah.
So, but now it's kind of, well, at least the judge who decided this or the panel that decided this have kind of revealed themselves to be like
a little out there
people. Now, actually, there is one step that could happen before going to the Supreme Court, which is it possible that, so there's something called an en banc hearing, which is where rather than appealing to the Supreme Court in certain circumstances, you can say, hey, look, I think these particular judges in this circuit are kind of wackadoodle, and I want a hearing before, like
a second opinion almost.
Yeah, sort of like a 9, I forget how many justices sit on bank, but it's like 9 justices, like the bigger group of justices from that same circuit have the chance to like
go
rein it in before. But of course, if this decision is reversed and the people who won this time will appeal to the Supreme Court, it'll get to the Supreme Court one way or the other.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
But,
this is going to be a fun one to watch, Jonathan. And I'm going to rely on you over the next weeks and months to kind of say, got an update. So
I mean,
crazy stuff.
Buy gold.
Buy gold. Yeah. Buy gold. Jonathan, this is fun. I've got 2 more fun topics. We'll get to them right now. Thanks, buddy.
Absolutely.